My name is Evelyn, and I am 32 years old. After working my way up from nothing to become a successful software engineer, I never imagined a family vacation would completely transform my relationship with my parents and brother. Throughout my life, they always favored my brother James over me, but everything changed during that trip to Hawaii. When they told me to sleep in the rental car so James could have the luxury suite, I simply smirked. Little did they know what I had planned. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below, hit that like button and subscribe to find out how I turned the tables on my family after years of being second best. Growing up in a middle-class Seattle suburb, I learned early on that my parents, Diana and Thomas, had a clear favorite child, and it wasn't me. My younger brother James received preferential treatment in ways both subtle and obvious, creating wounds that would take decades to heal. When I was 7 and James was 5, he received a brand new bicycle with all the accessories for his birthday. 3 months later, when my birthday came around, I got a used bike from our cousin that my father hastily repainted. I pretended not to notice, but the pattern was already establishing itself. School events highlighted the disparity even more clearly. When I won the state science competition in 8th grade, neither parent attended because James had a regular season soccer game. I stood alone receiving my trophy, while other parents snapped photos and hugged their children. "Your brother needs our support more," my mother would explain. "You're so independent and capable, Evelyn." Those words became her mantra, less a compliment and more an excuse to focus their attention elsewhere. By high school, I stopped inviting them to my events entirely. Why set myself up for disappointment? Our home life reflected the same imbalance. When we moved to a new house when I was 12, James automatically received the larger bedroom with the better view despite being younger. My protests were met with, "He has more energy. He needs the space to play." Even our mistakes were judged differently. When I accidentally broke a vase while cleaning, I lost my allowance for a month. When James deliberately kicked a soccer ball through a window, my father laughed it off as boys being boys and paid for the repair without consequences. Holiday gifts followed the same pattern. James would receive the latest gaming systems, expensive sports equipment, and name-brand clothes. My gifts were practical, often school-related, and clearly cost less. When I expressed disappointment one Christmas morning after receiving study guides while James unwrapped a new laptop, my mother pulled me aside. "Don't be selfish, Evelyn," she whispered sharply. "Your brother struggles more in school. You should be happy with what you have." The most painful memory came on my 10th birthday. I had planned a small party with my few close friends, sending invitations weeks in advance. The morning of the celebration, my parents announced we needed to cancel because James had an important baseball game. "It's the semifinals," my father explained while I fought back tears. "We can do your party next weekend." They never rescheduled. My friends called throughout the day wondering where I was. I sat alone in my room while my family cheered for James at his game. The only family member who seemed to notice the disparity was my Aunt Grace, my mother's sister. During her visits, she would bring me special gifts and take time to ask about my interests and achievements. She once confronted my parents about their treatment of me, which resulted in a family argument and her visits becoming less frequent. "You're going to be extraordinary, Evelyn," Aunt Grace told me during one of our private conversations. "Sometimes parents can't see past their own biases. Don't let their blindness dim your light." Those words became a lifeline during particularly difficult times. While my parents attended every one of James's average performances, celebrated his C grades as major accomplishments, and rushed to solve his every problem, I developed self-reliance and determination. I threw myself into academics knowing education would be my ticket to independence. While James received constant praise for minimal effort, I silently built a record of excellence. I joined every academic club, volunteered for community service that would strengthen my college applications, and worked part-time jobs to save money for my future. By senior year of high school, the contrast between us was stark. I had straight A's, was class valedictorian, and had secured a substantial scholarship to MIT. James barely maintained a C average, had been suspended twice for behavioral issues, and had no post-graduation plans beyond taking some time to find himself. Yet at my graduation ceremony, my parents spent most of their time explaining to relatives how James was just a different kind of learner, and how proud they were of his recent participation in a community baseball league. My valedictorian speech received polite applause from them, nothing more. That night, as I packed for college, I made a silent promise to myself. One day, they would recognize what they had overlooked all these years. One day, the tables would turn. I just didn't know then how dramatically that reversal would occur, or that it would happen on a family vacation years later. My years at MIT transformed me. While my parents paid full tuition for James to attend a local state college where he changed majors 3 times before dropping out, I thrived on my scholarship and the 3 jobs I worked to cover living expenses. "We need to help your brother focus on his studies," my mother explained when I asked why they wouldn't help with my textbook costs. "You've always been so good at figuring things out on your own." So I did. I became a resident advisor to get free housing. I tutored wealthy students in calculus and physics for cash. On weekends, I worked at a local tech startup, which turned into a valuable internship by my junior year. While James called home weekly for more money, complaining about how hard everything was, I called once a month for brief, polite conversations. My parents rarely asked about my classes or achievements, instead filling the time with updates about James and his latest endeavors, which invariably involved them providing financial support for his great new business idea. By graduation, I had multiple job offers from top tech companies. I chose a position in San Francisco with an innovative firm developing artificial intelligence applications. The starting salary was more than both my parents earned combined, but I never told them the figure. They never asked. "That's nice, honey," my mother said when I told her about the job. "James is thinking about going back to school for business. We're so excited." I moved to California and threw myself into building my career. Working 14-hour days, volunteering for the most challenging projects, and continuously expanding my skills paid off quickly. Within 3 years, I was leading a development team. By year 5, I had been promoted to senior developer with stock options that were rapidly increasing in value. During this time, my contact with my family dwindled further. Holiday visits became brief and uncomfortable with my parents, constantly steering conversations toward James's latest ventures and struggles. Each visit, they would inevitably bring up how I should be helping out the family, now that I had that fancy job. What they meant was that I should be financing James's perpetually failing business attempts, his apartment when he couldn't make rent, and his car payments when he purchased vehicles beyond his means. "We're not asking for ourselves," my father would say, "but your brother is going through a rough patch." James was always going through a rough patch. Meanwhile, I purchased my own luxury apartment in an exclusive San Francisco neighborhood. I traveled internationally, invested wisely, and built genuine friendships with colleagues and new acquaintances who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. The breakthrough in my career came in my 7th year at the company. My team developed a revolutionary algorithm for predictive analytics that transformed how businesses could forecast market trends. The project earned me significant recognition in the tech industry, substantial bonuses, and eventually my own division to lead. Articles about our innovation appeared in major tech publications. My name was mentioned in industry conferences. The financial rewards were substantial enough that, properly invested, I would never need to work again, though I loved what I did and had no intention of stopping. Not once did my parents mention seeing my name in these publications or hearing about my success. I wasn't sure if they were unaware or simply uninterested. During this time, I also began working with a therapist, Dr. Winters, to process my childhood experiences and establish healthier boundaries with my family. Those sessions helped me recognize the patterns of favoritism and emotional neglect that had shaped my early years. Your achievements aren't about proving your worth to your parents, Dr. Winters reminded me during one particularly emotional session. Success is about honoring your own potential. I was starting to believe that when I met Marcus at an industry conference. Successful in his own right as an architectural designer, he was refreshingly interested in my thoughts and experiences rather than what I could do for him. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives and dreams. Marcus came from a warm, supportive family who immediately embraced me during holidays and celebrations. The contrast with my own family dynamics was startling and healing. For the first time, I experienced what family support actually felt like. They missed out on knowing an extraordinary person, Marcus told me one night after I shared stories from my childhood. That's their loss, not a reflection of your value. With Marcus's encouragement and continued therapy, I established clearer boundaries with my parents and James. I politely declined their requests for financial help, instead offering to connect James with career counselors or financial advisors. These offers were always refused. "You've changed," my mother accused during one tense phone call. "Success has made you selfish." I had indeed changed. I had learned that I deserved respect, that my accomplishments mattered, and that constantly giving to people who took me for granted wasn't generosity, but self-harm. By my 32nd birthday, I had created a life beyond anything I could have imagined as that overlooked child in Seattle. I had a fulfilling career, a loving relationship, true friends, financial security, and a growing sense of self-worth that no longer depended on my family's validation. Then came the unexpected phone call that would set in motion events I couldn't have anticipated: a family vacation that would finally force my parents to see me clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. The call from my mother came on a Tuesday afternoon as I was reviewing quarterly projections for my team. Seeing her name on my phone screen was unusual enough to make me step away from my desk to answer. "Evelyn, we're planning a family reunion vacation to Hawaii next month," she announced without preamble. "Your father, myself, James, his new girlfriend Natalie, and we thought you should come too. It would mean a lot to the family." I was momentarily speechless. In the 3 years since I had reduced contact with them, there had been no family trips, no reunions, no special efforts to include me in anything. "Why now?" I asked, trying to keep the suspicion from my voice. "Can't a mother want to spend time with her children?" she replied, sounding wounded. "James thought it would be a good way for us all to reconnect. He's doing so well now with his new business consulting venture." Translation: James wanted a free vacation in Hawaii, and they assumed I would help pay for it. "I'll have to check my schedule," I said noncommittally. "When and where are you thinking?" "The Royal Hawaiian Resort in Waikiki," she said, naming one of the most expensive properties on the island. "For a week starting on the 15th, James has already looked into it and says the oceanfront suites are just gorgeous." I'm sure he had. I thanked her for the invitation and promised to call back after checking my availability. That evening, I discussed it with Marcus over dinner in our apartment. "You don't have to go," he reminded me. "You're allowed to protect your peace." "I know," I said, pushing my food around my plate. "But part of me wants to. Maybe it's masochistic, but I want them to see me as I am now, not as the desperate for approval child I used to be." "Then go," Marcus said, taking my hand across the table. "Show them exactly who Evelyn Bennett has become. Just remember, you can leave at any time if it becomes too much." The next day, I brought up the invitation in my therapy session with Dr. Winters. "What do you hope to get from this experience?" she asked thoughtfully. "Closure, maybe," I replied. "Or just the satisfaction of them finally seeing me as successful and independent on my own terms." Those are valid desires, she acknowledged. But what boundaries will you set to protect yourself? We spent the rest of the session discussing exactly that. By the end, I had a clear idea of what I was willing to tolerate and what would prompt me to leave early. I called my mother that evening and told her I would attend. She sounded genuinely pleased, though she quickly moved the conversation to James's excitement about the trip and his hopes to discuss his new business ideas with me. After hanging up, I made another call, this one to a former client who now managed exclusive properties for a luxury hotel group that included the Royal Hawaiian. Over the years, I had cultivated valuable connections through my work, and Sandra was happy to help when I explained what I wanted. The entire floor. That's quite a statement, Evelyn. She laughed. Consider it done. I'll make sure the staff knows to give you VIP treatment. I spent the next few weeks preparing for the trip in ways my family couldn't imagine. I arranged for my team to handle projects in my absence, ensuring I wouldn't need to be constantly connected. I shopped for a new vacation wardrobe that subtly communicated my success without being ostentatious, selecting designer pieces that looked effortless. My best friend Zoe joined me for the shopping trip, offering encouragement and reality checks in equal measure. You know they might still not get it right, she said as I tried on a sundress that cost more than my first month's rent after college. Some people are committed to their narratives despite all evidence. I know, I admitted, but this isn't just for them, it's for me too, to show myself how far I've come. In that case, Zoe grinned, add these sunglasses. They're perfect for looking down at people who underestimated you. The night before my flight, Marcus held me close in bed. Remember who you are, he whispered. Their opinion of you doesn't define your worth. I carried those words with me on the 5-hour flight from San Francisco to Honolulu. While my family had booked economy tickets and asked if I wanted them to include me in the group rate, I flew first class, using the time to center myself and prepare mentally for the week ahead. As the plane began its descent and the stunning blue waters and lush green mountains of Oahu came into view, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. This vacation would be different from any family gathering before. I was different, and soon they would understand exactly how much. The Honolulu airport buzzed with activity as I collected my luggage from the premium carousel. I had arrived an hour before my family's flight from Seattle was due to land, giving me time to arrange a private car to the resort rather than joining their shuttle transportation. I debated waiting for them at the airport, but decided against it. Better to meet on my terms at the resort. The driver helped with my bags, and soon we were traveling along the scenic coastal highway toward Waikiki Beach. First time in Hawaii? He asked conversationally. Yes, I smiled, though I'm meeting family here. Ah, family vacations? He nodded knowingly. Always interesting, yeah. Everybody together in paradise. I laughed softly. Interesting is one way to put it. The Royal Hawaiian Resort, known as the Pink Palace of the Pacific, lived up to its reputation. The historic pink stucco building, surrounded by swaying palm trees, exuded old-world luxury. As my car pulled up to the entrance, staff immediately approached to assist with my bags. Ms. Bennett! A woman in an elegant resort uniform greeted me. I'm Leilani, the guest relations manager. Sandra called ahead about your stay. We're delighted to have you with us. She personally escorted me through the ornate lobby with its soaring ceilings and tropical arrangements bypassing the regular check-in desk. We've prepared the entire 6th floor as requested, she explained quietly. The presidential suite and all connecting rooms. Your key card will access all of them, and we've stocked each with amenities according to your preferences. Thank you, Leilani. There will be family joining me, though they've made separate reservations. The Bennetts arriving today. Ah, yes, we have their reservation. A standard room and a junior suite. She hesitated delicately. Would you like them notified of your arrangement? Not yet. I smiled. I'd prefer to handle that personally. Of course. Fernando will be your dedicated concierge during your stay. Please don't hesitate to contact him for anything you need. After settling into the presidential suite with its breathtaking ocean views, separate living areas, and private lanai, I changed into a casual but expensive linen dress and prepared to meet my family. A text from my mother indicated they had arrived and were checking in. Taking a deep breath, I headed down to the lobby, maintaining the calm confidence I'd cultivated in boardroom negotiations. This was simply another type of negotiation, I reminded myself. I spotted them immediately looking tired from their flight and slightly overwhelmed by the resort's grandeur. My father was arguing with the check-in clerk while my mother hovered anxiously beside him. James and a young woman I assumed was Natalie stood slightly apart admiring the lobby. "Absolutely unacceptable," my father was saying as I approached. "We specifically requested rooms with an ocean view. These garden view rooms won't do." "I apologize, sir," the clerk responded professionally. "But our ocean view rooms are fully booked for your dates. The junior suite does have a partial ocean view from the balcony." "Is everything okay?" I asked, joining them. My mother turned her face, lighting up with performative enthusiasm. "Evelyn, you made it?" She moved to embrace me, and I allowed a brief hug before stepping back. "Hi, Mom. Dad?" I nodded to my father, who had paused his complaint to acknowledge me. "Your sister finally decides to join us," he commented to James, who wandered over with his girlfriend. "Hey, sis." James grinned, looking exactly as I remembered, but slightly heavier, and sporting an expensive watch that seemed out of place with his casual attire. "This is Natalie?" The young woman beside him was conventionally pretty, with carefully styled blonde hair, and a designer handbag that I suspected was either a gift or a knockoff. She smiled nervously. "So nice to finally meet you," she said. "James talks about you all the time." I doubted that very much, but returned her smile. "Likewise." My father returned his attention to the hapless clerk. "As I was saying, our confirmation specifically mentioned ocean views." "Dad, it's fine," I interjected. "I'm sure the rooms are lovely regardless of the view." He gave me a dismissive look. "Easy for you to say. You probably got the cheapest option available." I bit back a retort, reminding myself this was just the beginning. Once the check-in issues were resolved with my father grudgingly accepting the original reservation, we gathered in the lobby to plan the evening. "We have reservations at the hotel restaurant at 7, my mother announced. "We thought it would be nice to have dinner together our first night." "Sounds good," I agreed. "Should we meet in the lobby?" "We can just meet at your room and go down together," James suggested. "What room did they give you?" "I'm in 614, I said casually. "Top floor." My father frowned. "They put you on the 6th floor. We're on the 3rd. I specifically asked for all our rooms to be close together." "It's just how they assigned it," I shrugged. "See you all at 6:30. Dinner that evening set the tone for what I could expect from the trip. My parents spent most of the time focused on James and Natalie, asking about their lives, their relationship, and James's new consulting business, which appeared to primarily consist of him advising friends on their startup ideas for equity positions. When the conversation occasionally turned to me, it was superficial at best. "So, you're still at that computer company?" my father asked during dessert. "I'm now the director of AI implementation," I corrected, "overseeing a team of 30 developers." "That sounds technical," my mother said vaguely. "James is helping his friend Travis develop a revolutionary fitness app. He's always been so creative." And so it continued. James dominated the conversation with tales of his business prospects, each one sounding more implausible than the last. My parents hung on every word, occasionally glancing at me, as if expecting me to offer assistance or connections. When the check came, my father reached for it slowly, making a show of his generosity, while clearly hoping someone else would intervene. "I've got it," James announced, pulling out a credit card with a flourish. Later, I overheard him asking my father for a small loan to cover unexpected expenses. Back in my suite, I called Marcus to decompress. They haven't changed at all. I sighed. It's like I'm 16 again, invisible unless they need something. Remember why you're there, he reminded me gently. Not for their approval, but for your own closure. I know, I said, looking out at the moonlit ocean from my private balcony. The real test comes tomorrow anyway. What happens tomorrow? I smiled to myself. That's when they find out about the sleeping arrangements. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I rose early, went for a run along the beach, then enjoyed breakfast on my suite's private lanai. The expansive view of the Pacific Ocean stretched before me, turquoise waters meeting azure sky at the horizon. Paradise, if not for the family dynamics I was navigating. We had agreed to meet at 10 a.m. to discuss the day's activities. I arrived in the lobby precisely on time to find my family already gathered, looking refreshed after their first night. There she is, my mother called, waving unnecessarily. We were just talking about today's plans. Your father and I thought we could all do the Pearl Harbor tour this morning, then have lunch at that seafood place James found online. Sounds good. I agreed easily. No need to create conflict over small things. Before we go, my father interjected, his expression serious. We need to discuss the room situation. I raised an eyebrow. What about it? My mother glanced around to ensure no staff were within earshot before leaning forward. Well, there's been a slight issue. James and Natalie really need more space than the junior suite provides. Mom! James interrupted, looking embarrassed but not stopping her. James needs to make several important business calls, and Natalie is working remotely for part of the trip. My mother continued. They really need separate areas for privacy. And this concerns me how, I asked, though I knew exactly where this was heading. My father cleared his throat. We were thinking, since you're alone and don't have work commitments, maybe you could take the rental car for a couple of nights. James and Natalie could use your room. You want me to sleep in the car? I clarified, keeping my voice neutral. Just for 2 or 3 nights, my mother hastened to add. The seats reclined quite comfortably. Your father and I tried them. It's not a big deal, James added. You've always been independent and adaptable. Remember that time you camped in the backyard for your school project? That had been because they had given my bedroom to a visiting relative without asking me first. Some patterns never changed. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to give up my room and sleep in a car so James can have more space for his business calls? When you put it like that, it sounds awful. My mother frowned. It's just family helping family. You know we'd do the same for you. I nearly laughed at that blatant falsehood, but controlled my expression. I see, I said, a small smirk forming on my lips. That's actually quite cute. My parents exchanged confused glances. What's cute about it? My father asked suspiciously. Just that you assume I only have one room, I replied casually. James snorted. What did they upgrade you to, a suite too? Even so, ours is probably bigger. Not exactly, I said, reaching for my phone. Give me one moment. I texted Fernando, the dedicated concierge assigned to me. Within minutes, he appeared in the lobby immaculately dressed and professionally cordial. Ms. Bennett, he greeted me with a slight bow. How may I assist you? Fernando, I'd like to introduce my family. I gestured to the confused group. They seem to have some concerns about accommodations. Of course. He nodded. Is there anything specific I can help with? Perhaps you could clarify my current arrangement at the resort, I suggested. Fernando smiled warmly. Certainly. Ms. Bennett has reserved the entire 6th floor for the duration of your stay. The presidential suite as her primary accommodation, plus all connecting rooms. We've prepared them according to her specifications. As requested, no other guests have been booked on that floor. The silence that followed was profound. My father's mouth opened and closed without sound. My mother's face drained of color. James stared in disbelief while Natalie looked between us all with growing comprehension. "The entire floor," my father finally managed. "Yes, sir," Fernando confirmed. "Ms. Bennett is one of our most valued guests. Her connections in the hospitality industry are quite respected." I had no idea, my mother whispered, studying me as if seeing me for the first time. "There's a lot you don't know about me," I said quietly. "That's rather the point," Fernando, sensing the tension, smoothly interjected. "Ms. Bennett is everything to your satisfaction. As requested, we've prepared the entire floor for you and any guests you choose to accommodate." My family collectively flinched at the implication that their accommodation was now at my discretion. "Everything is perfect, Fernando, thank you," I replied. "I think my family might need a moment to process this information. Could you give us some privacy?" "Of course. Please contact me whenever you're ready to proceed with your day's activities." As Fernando departed, the silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, James broke it. "How can you possibly afford an entire floor at the Royal Hawaiian?" he demanded. "That must cost thousands per night." "Tens of thousands, actually," I corrected. "And I can afford it because I've built a successful career over the past decade, while you've been starting and abandoning new ventures every 6 months." "That's not fair," my mother protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I countered. "You've never once asked about my work in any meaningful way. You've never acknowledged my accomplishments. For years, you've treated me as an afterthought unless you needed something from me." "We've always been supportive," my father insisted, though he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Really? When I was promoted to team lead 3 years ago, I called to tell you." "Mom, you listened for 45 seconds before changing the subject to James's new girlfriend." "Dad, you asked if the promotion came with enough of a raise that I could help James with his rent." They had no response to that. "I developed a revolutionary AI algorithm that transformed our industry." I continued, my voice steady. "I was featured in Tech Innovators magazine. My team's work increased the company's value by billions. Did you know any of that?" From their stunned expressions, clearly they hadn't. "But you want me to sleep in a car, so James has space for business calls about ventures that never materialize." I shook my head. "That says everything about how you see me." "I had no idea you were doing so well," my mother said softly. "You never asked," I replied. "Not once." James, recovering from his shock, attempted to salvage his pride. "So you're rich now. Good for you. Does that make you better than us?" "No, James. What makes me different is that I stopped seeking validation from people who were never going to give it. I built a life based on my own worth, not others' perception of it." I turned to address them all. "I have 6 rooms on the 6th floor. You're welcome to move your things to any of them except the presidential suite, or you can stay where you are. Either way, I won't be sleeping in a car." With that, I walked away, leaving them to digest what had just happened. As I crossed the lobby, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if setting down a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged I was carrying. My phone buzzed with a text from Fernando. "Tour car ready whenever you're prepared to depart." I replied that I would be taking the Pearl Harbor tour privately and would meet my family for lunch if they still wished to join me. Some time apart would give us all space to recalibrate. This vacation had just begun, and already the family dynamic had shifted irrevocably. What remained to be seen was whether that shift would lead to healing or further division. Either way, I had said my piece. After years of silence and accommodation, I had finally stood up for myself in a way they couldn't ignore or dismiss. Whatever happened next, that victory was mine to keep. The aftermath of my revelation unfolded in stages like waves hitting the shore with increasing intensity. First came the stunned silence, then the hasty retreats as my family scattered to process what had happened, and finally, the inevitable confrontations that would determine our future relationship. I spent the morning at Pearl Harbor, finding unexpected emotional resonance in the memorial's quiet dignity. There was something powerful about acknowledging past wounds without allowing them to determine the future, a lesson that felt particularly relevant to my current situation. When I arrived at the seafood restaurant for our agreed-upon lunch, I was surprised to find only my mother waiting. "The others decided to eat at the resort," she explained awkwardly. "Your father needed some time to process." I nodded, unsurprised. My father had never handled challenges to his authority well. "I'm glad you came," I said sincerely as we were seated at a table overlooking the harbor. The first few minutes passed in uncomfortable small talk about the weather and the restaurant's decor. Finally, after our drinks arrived, my mother gathered her courage. "I had no idea you were so successful," she said, her eyes fixed on her glass. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I did try Mom many times, but the conversations always circled back to James." She flinched slightly but didn't deny it. "I never realized we were doing that." "Didn't you?" I challenged gently. "Think about our phone calls. What percentage of the time do we spend talking about my life versus James's?" She looked away, discomfort evident in her expression. "It wasn't intentional." "Maybe not consciously," I acknowledged. But the pattern was clear from childhood. James was always the priority, the favorite. I was the reliable one who didn't need attention or support. "We never meant to make you feel less important," she protested. "James just needed more help. He struggled with school, with finding direction. You always seemed so capable." "I was a child who needed her parents too," I said quietly. Being self-sufficient was a survival mechanism, not a personality trait. My mother was silent for a long moment. "I don't know what to say. We thought we were doing what was best." "For James, perhaps. Never for me." The waiter arrived with our appetizers, providing a brief respite from the intensity of our conversation. After he left, my mother tried a different approach. "Your job must be very demanding. All that responsibility." "It is, but I love it. I'm good at what I do, and I've built a team that respects and values my leadership." "And is there anyone special in your life?" she asked hesitantly. "You haven't mentioned anyone." "His name is Marcus. We've been together for nearly 2 years." Her eyes widened. 2 years? And you never mentioned him? Why would I, Mom? You've never shown interest in my life before. Why start with my romantic relationships? She looked genuinely hurt. That's not fair. We ask about your life. You ask superficial questions and then talk about James, I corrected. When was the last time you called just to check on me, not to tell me about James's latest scheme or ask for money? She couldn't answer that. Marcus is wonderful, by the way, I continued. He's an architectural designer. His family has welcomed me warmly. They ask about my work and actually listen to the answers. The implied comparison hung in the air between us. I'm sorry, she said, finally surprising me with what seemed like genuine remorse. I never realized how much we've hurt you. It's taken me years of therapy to process it, I admitted. Therapy? She looked alarmed. Was it really that bad? Yes, Mom, it was. Being constantly overlooked and devalued by the people who should love you unconditionally leaves scars. We ate in silence for a while, each processing the conversation in our own way. When our plates were cleared, my mother spoke again. "Can I ask why you came on this vacation if you feel this way about us?" It was a fair question, partly for closure, partly to finally be seen on my own terms, and partly because despite everything you're still my family. I wanted to see if there was anything worth salvaging. "And is there?" she asked quietly. "I don't know yet. That depends on what happens next." Back at the resort, my father was waiting in the lobby. His expression was a complex mixture of resentment, confusion, and grudging respect. "Your mother says you two had lunch," he began awkwardly. "We did. It was illuminating." He nodded stiffly. "James and Natalie have moved their things to the 6th floor. Room 612, I believe. Your mother and I are staying where we are." His pride wouldn't allow him to accept my offer. I had expected as much. "That's fine," I said simply. "This company of yours," he said abruptly. "What exactly do you do there?" It was the first time he'd ever asked directly about my work. Progress of a sort. "Would you like to sit down? It's a long explanation." To my surprise, he agreed. For the next hour, I explained my role, my team's innovations, and the impact of our work in terms he could understand. He listened with growing attentiveness, occasionally asking questions that revealed he was actually processing the information. "So this algorithm you developed," he said finally. "That's why you can afford to book an entire floor of a luxury resort." "Among other things, yes. I also made some smart investments early in my career." He shook his head, a complicated emotion crossing his face. "I had no idea. All this time we thought that I was just getting by, that James was the one with potential. He had the grace to look ashamed." Something like that. "You never gave me a chance to show you otherwise," I pointed out. "You decided our roles in the family when we were children, and nothing I did could change that perception." "That's not entirely fair," he protested but weakly. "Isn't it? When I graduated from MIT with honors, you spent the celebration dinner talking about how James might go back to community college. When I got my first promotion, you asked if I could now afford to help with James's car payments. Every accomplishment of mine was measured by how it could benefit him." My father was silent, unable to refute what we both knew was true. "I need to check on your mother," he said finally, standing up. "We'll see you at dinner." It wasn't an apology or even a clear acknowledgement, but it was something. The smallest crack in decades of willful blindness. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at my suite door. I opened it to find James standing there alone, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Can we talk?" he asked. I gestured him in, curious about his perspective on the day's events. He whistled low as he took in the presidential suite. "This is something else, sis. You really have been holding out on us." "I haven't been holding out on anyone, James. You all just never bothered to ask." He wandered to the window, taking in the panoramic ocean view. "So, all those times Mom and Dad asked you for money for me. I could have helped, yes. But should I have? Would it have actually helped you grow, or just enabled more dependence?" He turned to face me. "That's harsh." "It's reality. How many ventures have you started and abandoned in the last 5 years? How many times have you claimed to have the next big idea only to drop it when it required real work? Not everyone can be a tech genius," he said defensively. "This isn't about natural talent, James. It's about commitment and follow-through. I worked 3 jobs during college while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I put in 14-hour days for years to build my career. When have you ever stuck with anything that didn't provide immediate gratification? He had no answer for that. The crazy thing is, I continued more softly. I don't even blame you entirely. Mom and Dad created this dynamic. They rewarded your dependence while punishing my independence. They celebrated your mediocre efforts while ignoring my significant achievements. They love us both, he insisted, though without much conviction. Differently, I acknowledged. You they loved for who you were. Me they valued for what I could provide. Stability, self-sufficiency, and eventually, financial support. James sat heavily on one of the suite's elegant sofas. I never asked them to favor me. No, but you never discouraged it either. You accepted the double standard because it benefited you. He was quiet for a long moment. Oh, what happens now? You've made your point with the whole floor booking power move. Are you cutting us off completely? That's not what this is about. I sighed. I don't want to cut anyone off. I want relationships based on mutual respect, not one-sided giving. I want acknowledgement of who I actually am, not who you've all decided I should be. And if that doesn't happen, then I'll continue building my life with people who value me appropriately. Marcus, my friends, my colleagues, people who see me clearly. Marcus, he questioned. My partner of almost 2 years. Another detail none of you ever asked about. James had the grace to look embarrassed. Guess we've been pretty self-absorbed. That's putting it mildly. We talked for another hour more openly than we had in years. While I didn't sense a profound transformation in James, there was at least a new awareness of the imbalance that had defined our relationship. It was a start. That evening, dinner was a subdued affair. My parents made visible efforts to ask about my life and work, though their questions were often awkward and superficial. James was quieter than usual, observing the shifting family dynamic with newfound attentiveness. Only Natalie seemed completely comfortable, perhaps because she had no stake in our shared history. She asked intelligent questions about my career and genuinely listened to the answers. In another context, we might have become friends. As we finished dessert, my mother cleared her throat nervously. We were thinking about visiting the botanical gardens tomorrow, all of us together. Would you like to join us, Evelyn? It was a small olive branch, but a meaningful one. I'd like that, I said, offering a genuine smile. The rest of the vacation unfolded with a new fragile awareness. Old patterns occasionally reasserted themselves, but each time I calmly pointed them out rather than silently accepting them. Sometimes this led to tension, other times to reluctant acknowledgement. On the 5th day, I received a text from Aunt Grace. My mother had apparently called and told her about our confrontation. Finally, her message read, "So proud of you for standing up for yourself. I'm flying in tomorrow. Save me one of those fancy rooms." Her arrival added a welcome dimension to the family dynamic. As the only person who had consistently seen and valued me throughout my life, her presence was both validating and balancing. She had no patience for my parents' attempts to minimize the past. "You both failed her," she told them bluntly during a private beach gathering I overheard from nearby. "It's a miracle she turned out so wonderfully despite your neglect. The least you can do now is acknowledge it and do better." My mother wept. My father stared silently at the ocean. But something shifted after that conversation, as if hearing the truth from someone their own age carried weight my words alone couldn't. When it came time for our departure, we gathered in the lobby for goodbyes. The week had not magically healed decades of dysfunction, but it had cracked open a door that had previously been sealed shut. "Thank you for this week," my mother said, embracing me with what felt like genuine warmth. And for making us see what we've been blind to for too long. My father, never comfortable with emotional conversations, simply said, "You've built an impressive life, Evelyn. We should have paid more attention." Coming from him, it was practically a tearful apology. James and I exchanged a look of new understanding. "Next time, dinner's on me," he said. "Though maybe just at a regular restaurant, not a place with gold-plated everything." I laughed. "Deal." As they departed for their economy flight back to Seattle, I remained behind with Aunt Grace, having arranged for us both to fly first class the following day. "You did good, kiddo," she said as we watched them go. "Should have done it years ago." "I wasn't strong enough then," I admitted. "I needed to build myself up first." She squeezed my hand. "Well, you certainly did that. Now are you going to show me this fancy suite of yours? Or what I want to take a bubble bath in what I assume is a tub the size of my entire bathroom?" I laughed and led her upstairs, grateful for her unwavering support and for my own journey to self-worth that had made this week's confrontation possible. The vacation that had begun with my parents telling me to sleep in a car had transformed into something I couldn't have anticipated, the first step toward either healing our family relationships or releasing them with peace rather than resentment. Either way, I had finally been seen not as the convenient, self-sufficient daughter they had labeled me, but as the successful, complex woman I had become. That recognition, so long denied, was worth every uncomfortable moment of confrontation. As Aunt Grace and I toasted with champagne on the suite's lanai that evening, I felt a sense of closure and possibility, the weight of unmet expectations finally lifted from my shoulders. The months following our Hawaii confrontation brought changes I could never have predicted, some welcome and others challenging. The family dynamic had been irrevocably altered, and we were all adjusting to this new reality in our own ways. My return to San Francisco and my normal life felt like stepping between worlds. Marcus welcomed me home with quiet understanding, listening as I recounted the week's emotional revelations. "How does it feel?" he asked as we sat on our balcony overlooking the city lights. "To finally have said all those things you've held back for years." I considered the question carefully. Liberating, sad, hopeful, all at once. Like I've been carrying this heavy backpack for so long, I forgot it was there, and suddenly it's gone. I feel lighter, but also a little off balance. "That makes sense." He nodded. "You've changed the story your family has been telling about itself for decades. That's bound to create some disequilibrium." The first tangible change came in the form of communication patterns. My mother began calling weekly, her questions about my life and work, still somewhat awkward but increasingly genuine. She mentioned having started therapy herself, a development I would never have expected from a woman who had always dismissed psychological support as unnecessary for people with good family values. "I want to understand," she told me during one call, "how we got here. How I could have been so blind to your feelings for so long." My father found direct communication more difficult. Instead, he began sending me articles about technology and innovation with brief messages like, "Thought you might find this interesting," or "Reminded me of what you said about your work." It was his way of acknowledging my professional world, clumsy but sincere. James and I established a new, more balanced relationship. The lifetime of competition and resentment slowly transformed into something approaching mutual respect. He even followed through on his promise to take me to dinner when I visited Seattle 2 months after Hawaii, choosing a restaurant within his actual budget rather than expecting me to cover an extravagant meal. "I'm trying something new," he told me over dinner. "An actual job with a tech startup. Entry level, but it's steady." "That's great," I said, genuinely pleased. "What changed your mind about the traditional employment path?" He looked slightly embarrassed. Honestly, seeing how far you've come by actually sticking with something made me realize that quick schemes aren't building anything real. It wasn't a complete personality transformation, but it was growth. I later learned from my mother that my parents had finally stopped automatically funding his ventures and living expenses, requiring him to demonstrate commitment before receiving any financial support. The new boundaries were challenging for everyone, but ultimately healthier. My relationship with Marcus deepened through this period of family recalibration. Having witnessed my struggle to assert my worth with my family, he proposed 6 months after the Hawaii trip on a weekend hike to a secluded waterfall. "I see you," he said, simply holding out the ring. "All of you exactly as you are, and I love every part." The wedding planning brought new tests of the evolving family dynamic. My mother immediately assumed she would take charge of arrangements, falling back into old patterns where my preferences were secondary. "The Bennett family always has formal church weddings," she declared during an early planning call. "Your cousin Rachel's wedding at First Presbyterian was lovely. We should book it before the date is taken." "Mom," I said firmly. "Marcus and I want an outdoor ceremony at the botanical garden where he proposed. This is our wedding, not a family tradition fulfillment exercise." There was a brief silence before she responded. "You're right. I'm sorry. Old habits." That acknowledgement, small as it was, represented significant progress. The old version of my mother would have pushed until I either gave in or created a major conflict. My father's adjustment to our new relationship dynamic faced its biggest test when I told my parents that Marcus's father would be sharing the role of walking me down the aisle. "But that's the father's place," my father protested, genuinely hurt. "I've been looking forward to that." "Marcus's father has been consistently supportive of me for the past 3 years," I explained gently. "He's earned his place in that role alongside you." It was a difficult conversation, but ultimately, my father accepted the decision, perhaps understanding it as a natural consequence of the relationship he had built or failed to build with me over the years. James surprised everyone by taking his role as my attendant. I had no traditional bridesmaids or groomsmen, seriously helping with arrangements, and even giving a thoughtful toast at the rehearsal dinner. "To my sister," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me that true success comes from perseverance, not shortcuts. I'm still learning that lesson, but I'm grateful for the example." Through all these family adjustments, I continued my work with Dr. Winters, processing the shifting relationships and ensuring I maintained healthy boundaries. "Reconciliation doesn't mean returning to old patterns," she reminded me during one session. "It means building something new on a foundation of mutual respect and clear communication." That foundation was tested and strengthened through countless small interactions, some successful and others requiring further adjustment. There were still painful moments, times when old wounds were inadvertently reopened, or when ingrained behaviors reasserted themselves. During one difficult visit to Seattle, my mother absent-mindedly remarked how lucky I was in my career, dismissing years of hard work as good fortune. When I calmly pointed this out, she became defensive before catching herself. "I'm doing it again, aren't I?" she sighed. "Minimizing your efforts." "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I see how hard you've worked for everything you've achieved." These moments of awareness and accountability, though sometimes painful in the moment, gradually built a more authentic relationship than we had ever had before. The most profound healing came unexpectedly, nearly a year after Hawaii, when my parents visited our San Francisco home for the first time. Seeing my life in context, meeting my colleagues and friends at a dinner party we hosted, witnessing the respect others had for me professionally and personally, seemed to finally make my success real to them in a way that words alone hadn't. "I understand now," my father said quietly as we stood on my balcony overlooking the bay. "What you've built, who you've become. I'm sorry we missed so much of the journey. It wasn't a dramatic Hollywood moment of perfect reconciliation. The damage of decades couldn't be undone in a single conversation or even a single year. But it was an acknowledgement, a step toward a relationship based on who we actually were, rather than the roles we had been assigned in the family narrative. On my wedding day, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and family members, both biological and chosen, I felt a sense of integration I hadn't thought possible. My past, present, and future no longer seemed like separate countries, but connected territories in the landscape of my life. As both my father and Marcus's father walked me down the aisle, I caught Aunt Grace's eye in the front row. She gave me a tiny wink and a nod that conveyed everything pride in how far I'd come. Acknowledgement of the journey's difficulty and joy in the woman I had become. That night, during a quiet moment at the reception, Marcus found me taking a breather from the celebration. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Completely," I replied, though not in the way I would have expected a year ago. How so? I considered the question watching as my parents chatted amiably with Marcus's family across the room, as James danced somewhat awkwardly but enthusiastically with one of my colleagues as the various parts of my life mingled and connected. I always thought being truly happy would mean either getting my family's approval or cutting them off entirely, I explained. But it's neither. It's building a relationship where I don't need their approval to know my worth, but can still allow them into my life on new terms. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The real power move. Exactly. Not booking an entire hotel floor to prove a point. I laughed, though that was admittedly satisfying. A necessary step in the journey, he grinned. Looking back now, that's exactly what the Hawaii confrontation had been. Not an endpoint, but a beginning. The moment I stopped accepting the role I had been assigned and demanded to be seen authentically marked the start of a new chapter for my entire family. The healing wasn't perfect or complete. There were still moments of falling into old patterns, still occasional pain when past wounds were inadvertently touched. But there was also growth awareness and a willingness to build something healthier than what had come before. Most importantly, I had found my own center of gravity. My worth was no longer tied to external validation from parents who had been unable to see me clearly. Instead, it was anchored in self-knowledge, in the relationships I had built with people who valued me authentically, and in the life I had created on my own terms. That has been the most valuable lesson of this journey. True self-worth isn't about proving yourself to others or gaining their approval. It's about recognizing your own value, regardless of whether others acknowledge it, and building a life that honors that understanding. If you've ever felt unseen or undervalued by those who should have cherished you, most know that your worth isn't determined by their perception. You can create a life that reflects your true value, set boundaries that protect your peace, and find people who see you clearly. Sometimes, like in that hotel in Hawaii, you might even get the satisfaction of watching those who dismissed you realize exactly what they've been missing. Have you ever had to stand up to family who didn't appreciate your worth? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be valued. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is inherent, not assigned by others.